And welcome back. Well, if you're watching this video in order of the performance build series, to briefly recap the last video, we went ahead and installed our SRT4 map sensor into our manifold along with the billet adapter supplied by Procharger. We got our head unit with our remote oil drain line installed, and we put 6 ounces of oil into the head unit per Procharger's instructions. And we also got our heater core hoses installed and connected up into the fittings on our water pump. And if you remember from previous segments, we were waiting on a accessory belt to come in, so that way we could put that one on, and then the supercharger belt. That accessory belt did arrive. We have it now. And we also received, just a few moments ago, our replacement ignition coil for our number 8 cylinder. So we're going to go ahead and work on getting this one in. So I think what we're going to do today is we're going to get that coil in, that number 8 coil in the back. We'll get our accessory belt mounted on, and then our belt for our supercharger mounted on. And that will allow us to now start taking care of a couple other items that would be easier to take care of before we put the front radiator support back in. And I'm thinking what we can do is start to install our new power steering lines at that point, as well as our air conditioning lines at that point. And I think that may be the final couple pieces that we can do before we jump to getting the radiator installed. One of those coolant lines will run over here. This is our liquid line. One of the lines off the AC compressor will also run up to here, and then we can get it bolted back to the expansion valve while we're at it. And I think we'll be good at that. And then one other item, that we'll also take care of in this video is going to be a little, I don't know which one to call it, like a terminal block. And part of the duct work for the procharger is what they call a bypass valve. You'd probably heard it more referred to as a blow-off valve or a pop-off valve for a supercharger system. So what happens is that, let's say you're in wide open throttle and you're building X number of pounds of boost, and all of a sudden you just come off the throttle and this throttle plate closes. It's kind of like a stream of individuals making a run for a club, getting to the front door of the club, and the bouncer closes the door. Well, the problem is the door to the club is closed, and you have individuals that are trying to get in. So they're going to look for another path to go. Well, on a supercharged system, turbochargers as well, unless you give that pressure a place to go, it's going to find a place to go, and it may not be where you want it to go. Generally, what ends up happening is, let's say you're building 6, 7, 8 pounds of boost, at least in this particular application. It could be higher depending on what you're running, and all of a sudden this door closes. That X number of pounds of boost, not having another place to go, will try to feed backwards or feed into the supercharger while the supercharger is spinning. Basically trying to get it to either stop spinning, making it either stop spinning, or trying to get it to spin the opposite direction. So it's what they call surging the supercharger. It'll make a very distinct, like whoop, whoop, whoop type noise. So what happens is they're going to have us tap into the vacuum feed for the brake booster and put like a little billet block in here. And it's going to have one barb with a vacuum / pressure line that's going to go to their relief valve. But we're also going to tap into an unused port on that block they give us, and we're going to install our other Banks sensor that we're going to use to monitor our boost pressure. So that'll be a pretty interesting setup. So I think what we might do is we'll go ahead and get that coil in, and I'll do that off camera. You've seen me put these coils in before. But I'll bring you back just as we're prepping to make a modification to this 3/8 vacuum line. and then we'll go over that block install. So let me get this cold pack in and I'll bring you back. One moment. And welcome back. So we got our number 8 coil on top of our cylinders at this point and secured into the valve cover. And we've got our wiring plugged in. So we've got all of our coils, all the coil wiring, and all the injectors are in at this point. And this is the next piece I wanted to show you. This is in relation to what they call, let's see, again, showing you that anti-surge system in the book. And this is their ProFlow valve. If you need like a more competition / race version of this, they do sell an upgraded version of that valve. But for the horsepower that we're going to be doing and what we'll be doing, that this valve will be more than enough adequate. And I'm going to make a couple of changes to this, but I'll explain those. So this is the manifold block, and what they want us to do is cut a 3-inch section out of this vacuum hose, this 3/8 vacuum hose, go into our brake booster. Now I set the engine cover on here temporarily, and it looks like this section in here is our cleanest section, kind of right above the number 1 and number 3 spark plug coils here on the driver's side, in order to be able to get the block in here, but also not interfere with the engine cover fit or be slightly under it. So I think we're going to aim for this area in here to install the block, much like they kind of show in their manual, just showing you that picture there. So you can see that they've got a block with 2 ports blocked off, and they're just using the center one to go to their purge valve. So what I figured we would do is we'll use the center one, kind of as they described, for their use, but then we're going to come in through the back side here because they conveniently gave us 2 more ports. We'll put a block off plug in one, and we'll screw our pressure sensor. Now this is our Banks 0 to 15, again, liquid / air capable or air compatible pressure sensor, and that'll go on the other side of that block, and eventually, which will allow us to read our boost pressure within our iDash. So let me get this hose off, and then I'll kind of get you in a different spot here, set you up on the tripod, and we'll go through the modifications of putting this together. Now I have one more modification that I'll also show you. They use the barbs along with a roll. If I can find it here, there it is. They give you the tubing to do it. And this tubing is fine. There's nothing wrong with it. You can absolutely use it. This is their vacuum tubing that's used to run between this block and that valve where it's going to sit once the intercool piping is in. Well, years ago when we were doing this originally on the 2500 truck, I ran across an individual whose channel is Boosted Motorsports, and he used this instead. To me, I agree with him. It makes a little bit cleaner, a little bit more robust look, and this is the 1/4 inch pneumatic airline, and a lot of individuals use this for methanol sprays and such. But the cool thing is what you can get and use with that line, let me grab a bag of them here just for an example, are these little push-in quick release fittings. So you can take that line, push it in, it'll hold on to it. When you want to release that line, you just, for instance on this one, you just push in on that blue collar, and then you can pull your line back out. So it makes for, at least in my opinion, a little bit cleaner of a look than running a bunch of vacuum tubing all around your engine. Again, it's not a dig on the kit. It's not saying this won't get the job done. It definitely will. We're just looking to kind of upgrade things just a tad bit. And yes, this line will handle at least 7 psi or more boost because we use this on our 2500, which is capable of it about 7 to 8 psi. And I've never had this line pop out of these fittings so far. So let me get you set up and get you on a little bit more of a flatter surface so we got some area to work, and I'll bring you right back. One moment. And welcome back. So just got you set up on the floor here, and we got our little section, 3-inch section of our vacuum hose cut out. And all I did was kind of put this, while it was sitting on the vacuum booster for the brake assist, just kind of started a mark right where that flat spot started in that bend, measured 3 inches down, and cut the appropriate piece out. Now these are barbed fittings, so generally once you get them kind of crammed in place, they're a little difficult to get back out. But we went ahead and started our first one, so we're good there. They give you hose clamps in this bag as well to secure these fittings with. So we'll need one each of them. I'm just looking for, there we go. So that is a 8mm socket. Now if you've got the spring-loaded clamps and you prefer to put the spring clamps on this, then by all means. There we go. I just took, this is the end that goes into the brake booster. I just took that end off so we could get our clamp on. And this is going to come down the brake booster, so when we put our clamps on, we're going to go about like that, just so we can make our screws accessible in case we got to loosen these clamps up. But I'm just going to leave them dangle loose for a bit. Take this other side. We're going to go ahead and put some liquid thread sealant. Onto this barb fitting. We definitely want to make sure we got a good seal on this, because we don't want vacuum leaks, A, and B, we definitely don't want any boost leaks. Okay. One moment, let me go grab another wrench. One moment. And welcome back. Sorry about that. Had to go get another tool. Just tightening the fitting into our block here. For the first barb fitting, this is again the one that will go and allow us to reconnect our 3/8 vacuum hose to our brake booster. Okay, that's nice and snug. There's our first one. Just going to do the same thing with this piece here. Just get a little thread sealant on it, and then we'll get it onto the block. The book doesn't say to use thread sealant on this. It seems to be like a tapered fit into their block. But I'm going to use a little thread sealant on it anyway. If anything, just to give it that extra bit of protection. Okay, I'm going to get this tight. I'm just holding with one big crescent wrench their block and just tightening with another one. So basically just this. Okay, that's tight enough. After I drop it, what we'll have to do, I kept this screw clamp off this side deliberately just so we can kind of rotate it if needed to give us the best alignment once we got it back up into the truck. But let's go ahead and take care of at least one of the blocks we're going to need. We're going to block off one of the ports on the opposite side, but not both. Remember, we're going to use one for the Banks sensor. Just applying some thread sealant to that plug. And let's see, if we have their purge valve come out of the top like they do in the manual, then let's take this far left-hand one and block it off. And then we'll put our sensor in the other port. Really, we could use either one, but at least that secondary port being closer to where the brake booster is, this hose here puts it a little bit closer to the firewall. Okay, so we got that. Now for one of our other modifications we spoke about earlier. I'm going to take one of our fittings for our 1/4-inch line we looked at. And remember, we're going to use this in place of the barbed fitting that comes inside the bag. And what we're going to do is use this one on the top. I'm just going to work on getting it threaded into the block here. That's right, we want this one on top. No. Clean up some excess sealant here. Oop, don't mean to knock you over there. My apologies. Okay, yep, that's good. That's tight enough. Now we have that piece threaded in. So what we'll do once we know the location of exactly where this valve is going to sit in our interducting, what we'll do is we'll remove this barbed fitting, and I've got a 90-degree version of this that we'll more than likely end up using, and we'll just replace again that barb with one of those 90-degree quick disconnect fittings, and that's how we'll make our connection using our rigid tubing. Now we got a sensor yet. Same process. I'm going to put some thread sealant on these threads, and we'll get that threaded into the block. Okay. And we take our last port. Once it starts to thread, there we go. And I'm going to get this one tightened up in the same fashion. There we go. Okay. That should be tight enough. This feels nice and tight. So kind of what we end up with is an assembly that looks a little bit like this. Clean off some more of my fingerprints here. There we go. So this one's going to be the end that goes into this hose. We'll have a hose clamp on it. That'll go to the intake. And then we'll end up with this one going to their purge valve. And then we'll end up with this one with an electrical connector on it that goes to our banks gauges. So let me get the other hose clamp. I think we wanted to go that way with our hose clamps. Sorry, I'm just pulling this protective webbing back off of this hose. Now that it's a bit shorter, you can trim this stuff. Oops, sorry. You can trim this stuff if you want. But you can also just kind of push it backwards. Let's get our hose clamp going in the same direction. It should be about like that. And then let's just push this on. We could always rotate this hose in a bit. There we go. Okay. So now that we got our contraption assembled here and our modifications done, let me pause you, move you into a better viewing position, and I'll bring you back. One moment. And welcome back. So let's get our plug back into our brake booster. Okay, there we go. Let's get it plugged into our intake manifold, just so we can kind of gauge where everything is going to kind of fall, which is good. Kind of got about it where we wanted it. And what we can do is let's put a little bit more of a turn in it, like that. Just so that our hose goes a little bit, our top hose that'll feed our purge will go kind of more up. Yeah, it seems to be happy right there. We can let it sit right there. Yeah, I think that'll work. That'll work. Yeah, it's more than enough supported by where it's resting over here as far as being plugged in the intake manifold. We got a good position here. We can come out with our tubing, kind of follow any number of harnesses over to where that purge valve is going to end up sitting. And if we have to, we can always take this out and like put a 90-degree fitting in here instead and kind of come off to any angle that we need. If we need to, again, we've got a plug down here. We could also move their bit over to this plug and route it down in this way on the driver's side if it ends up that way. I believe it comes out on the passenger side somewhere as far as where they have you putting that anti-surge. As a matter of fact, let's see if they've got a diagram on that intercooling ducting. Sometimes in these manuals they give you a little drawing to kind of give you something to go by. Let's see, that is a 2018 plus 2011 to 17. Well, that's interesting. Okay, I guess we're going to use the 2011 to 17 method. Tube. So they've got two schematics here in their manual. They got a 2018 plus, which is that one, so that's not necessarily the one that we're going to be using, although it might be. It's pretty close. We'll have to see, because that tube right there that's got this little offshoot to the side of it, that's where the blow-off valve is going to end up. And then they got a 2011 to 17, which it looks like it's possibly right there, tube number 109. And inside of there, let's see here, just getting back to the supplied, 3 inches, got it. Looking for the install the probe onto the surge tube as provided. So yeah, that looks like that's the one. So in either case, whether it's this schematic or the other diagram, it looks like we're going to be over here on the passenger side where the head unit is located. So I think we'll be good with what we got right here, because then we could just kind of come out this way, maybe tie wrap to this area of our vacuum hose for our brake booster and just continue it this way into that purge solenoid, which looks like it's going to be possibly somewhere in here. So yeah, that shouldn't be bad at all. We should be able to come here, go over here, come down, come underneath the supercharger head unit, and then plug into that valve. Okay, I think that'll work. But again, if not, we can always adjust it. Let me get your tripod set back up here. There we go. Okay, so all that's left to do on this one is that let's get our hose clamps rotated in a position that we can easily get to them, and then we'll get these tightened up, and I'll bring you back. One moment. And welcome back. Well, as I mentioned at the beginning of this video, we received the accessories belt we were looking for, and that is the part number there. This is just the heavy duty version, so it's a K060795. I like to usually get the heavy duty version of the standard belts. It's just a preference thing, even though these are just the accessories. So let's see, I'm going to put it on writing side forward, so as you're facing the forward of the engine you can read your writing. I mean, you can put it on any way you want, forwards or backwards, doesn't matter, but just a preference thing. Let's see, let's get it around. Remember, on this bottom pulley, we're only using, let me see if I can get you a bit closer. See, does that mess cut you out any? Let's see, I can pan you down at least, and then we'll back you up as we get more and more into this. Remember, this bottom pulley that we put on for the accessories is an 8-rib pulley from ATI, and we're only using the first 6. So it's going to be the first 6 from the inside out. So let's go ahead and take care of that one first. Making sure that we're seated. Now when it comes off of this crank pulley, it has to go around the tensioner. Smooth side of the tensioner, smooth side of the belt. There we go. And the rest of this belt can come up. Hits our water pump. Okay, let me back you up and pan you up. There we go. So once again, just making sure that this keeps some tension on this bottom pulley here so we stay in the right 6 out of 8 grooves. Okay, then we need to come over and around, and eventually, hopefully we get enough tension back from our tensioner, or enough belt slack from our tensioner. There we go. See, we were a little bit off on that bottom pulley. So again, I'm just making sure that we're on the right 6, the first 6 ribs. Okay. Let me get a 3/8 in here with a little bit of cheater pipe. Back our tensioner off. And see if we've got enough throw. And we need to go the other way. Yep. Sorry if I'm blocking a lot of your view. Just holding tension on this belt at the same time. Getting that ratchet in a good enough position. I'm just using a piece of electrical EMT conduit for a cheater pipe because it fits the 3/8 ratchet handle quite nicely. There we go. Let's make sure that we're still seated, and we are. Perfect. And we got about maybe about a 1/4 inch of space left on our tensioner. after all is said and done. So this is a 6% overdrive pulley that this ATI kit comes with. So it does eat up a little bit more of your belt tensioner than a standard factory pulley would. But you can see a factory belt still fits fine. So that's awesome. Yep, around the alternator, rounder idler, power steering pump, hits the air conditioner pulley, comes across, hits the crank, from the crank, around the tensioner, around the water pump, and over. Okay, so beautiful. Well, let's switch out to a 1/2-inch ratchet now. Let's back you up and move you over a little bit. Now let's put the big boy on. Now what they give you in the kit that comes with procharger is this belt right here. Looks to be a standard 8-ribbed belt. It does say EPDM. And you can see the part number is an APK 1700. In this particular manufacturer, they give you the alternate part numbers as mainly an A0670. So, because I like to try to make things match, I went out and got this one instead. You can see we've got an A0670, except it's an HD, so it's again a Gates heavy-duty belt. Nothing wrong with the belt they sent with it. I'm sure it'll get the job done. But we're going to switch out to a heavy-duty belt to help our longevity out a little bit, maybe. I usually like to use the heavy-duty version of the belts, with the exception of the supercharger. Unfortunately, Gates does make a supercharger belt line called RPM. However, they did not have this size, this particular model in an RPM. Now, we've got some travel with our tensioner, where if we have to play with it, we may be able to get close to the size, because now that we know what the starting belt for this is, and we know that we have a little bit of play in that tensioner, we may be able to get close and switch out to an RPM belt. It may just maybe a slightly different model number. It was in Gates' catalog at one point, and then it looks like maybe they discontinued it, or they only make it special order. But looking at the belt diagram for the procharger, and there it is right there. Let me get a 1/2-inch ratchet. And once again, I'm going to make it to where our words face forward. And it looks like we need to, we can see this go around supercharger pulley. Obviously that's a, let me raise you up a little bit. There we go. And let's get our wiring harness out of the way. We definitely don't want to crash onto that. So we go around the smooth pulley using the smooth side of the belt. And then our tensioner comes into play this way. And it looks like we're supposed to do, yeah, something like that. Let me get your pan down here so you can see the lower crank as well. Okay, so now that we've got an idea of the direction this is going to go in, there we go. Okay, so we got to go to loosen this tensioner. It is clockwise on our ratchet. Now let's get around our bottom pulley first. Got it. And then here Around our smooth pulley, we're going back around our supercharger head. Pan you back up a little bit. Okay. And then we got to go this way, and this needs to go down. Let's do that first. Okay, let me get you so you can see we're around our bottom pulley. We got the groove side of the belt on our grooved based idler. We're on the flat part of our tensioner with our flat side of our belt. The top pulley, we've got the smooth side on, smooth side on. So now we should be able to, let's see. Oh, I'm going the wrong way with our tensioner. Aha. So correction, counterclockwise. So we want to alleviate the tension. Come on. Okay, let me do this. Oh, as with anything, it's a fight. So it's hard to get around this supercharger pulley because of the groove on it. So let's see if we can do that first and maybe just slip it around this smoother pulley as our last resort. But let me get on the other side of you so I can get at this a bit easier. This tensioner is there we go. There we go. We just had to crank on our back off on our tensioner a bit more than what we were. Just had to use a little bit more force. Okay. Let me get you off the tripod so I can show you this. There we go. So you can see we're around our bottom pulley, main pulley. We had a groove tensioner here. We come up around this side. I'm sorry, a grooved pulley, grooved idler. We come around this side of our tensioner, around our supercharger, around our smooth pulley, and obviously back again. So what I wasn't doing to give myself enough slack was I wasn't cranking counterclockwise on this tensioner enough to kind of pull it more to this direction to get the slack needed. But as you can see, we're on. We've got both our belts on, which awesome. I like the way it looks. I like the fact that we matches. And they're both facing the same direction, so they're both readable from the front of the engine. Again, just a preference thing. Let's see. Other items that we can take care of. While we've got access to the inside of the engine compartment, we could step forward a bit more. Let's do this. We've got our data line here for our Banks iDash. Let's grab the module that's supposed to set out here in the bay, figure out where we're going to get it mounted, and then we can go ahead and hook up the electrical for the fuel pressure sensor and the boost sensor. So awesome. Let's do that. And I'm just checking this bottom accessory pulley. Okay, because again, we're only using 6 ribs, so just getting a little bit paranoid, wanting to make sure that's seated, and it is. Okay, so let me go grab some bits and pieces, and I'll bring you back. One moment. And welcome back. So just looking at our equipment here. Remember, this is our Banks 4-channel analog monitor, which are 2 sensors for now we'll plug into, which will be our fuel pressure and our boost pressure, and then eventually, once we complete the modifications, transmission temp sensor and a differential temp sensor will also plug into there. So I'm just looking for, like, you know, little, maybe a threaded unused portion of the firewall or something along that nature that we can now this bracket is, you have to buy this bracket separate, unfortunately, but this is a mounting bracket for this receiver, as you can see, or that monitor, as you can see. So I was looking for maybe just something existing, like an existing bolt or an unused threaded insert or something we could just attach this to. And if you've watched the previous videos, you know, I potentially talked about putting that analog monitor just kind of over here, so that way it was close to the existing ECU, just kind of keeping like items like. So I was looking over here, and I was also looking in the cubby hole where the ABS module is at, and it doesn't look like there's any existing like studs or like a bolt we can undo that would be long enough to allow us to lock it into someplace. So what I ended up doing was I just drilled their hole out in their bracket a little bit bigger. It came with two of these screws here, like self-tapper sheet metal screws. I don't really want to use sheet metal because I don't want them to vibrate loose. So what I did was drilled it long enough to get into one of the mounting studs for the bracket for the ECU, and it's this one right here. So I'm just gonna take that bolt off real quick, bolt in our bracket, which will hold our analog sensor, and then we can run our wiring, which the existing wiring that came with it is more than long enough to get from here all the way to the other side and then plug into our sensors, as well as this cable here might be just long enough. It looks like it's going to be just long enough to kind of do what we need it to do, to have it over here. If not, remember, I've got a small extension cable for that we can just extend it with. So let me get this bracket and then this analog monitor mounted, and I'll bring you back. One moment. And welcome back. So just in the process of getting that bracket mounted onto that stud, and just because of the clearance of trying to twist this up and hit the underside of the cowling there, it's going to be easier to have the module installed on the bracket and then the cable installed on the module before we do it. So you can see we've got our I-dash data cable running behind our brake booster. We'll tuck it behind the intake along with the other wiring harnesses that are back there, just to keep it out of the way of the engine cover and such. And you can see that we're on our lock pin there. So you put it on in that position, which is unlocked, get the pins to seat, and you just slide this down and it'll lock this cable into this module. So now that we kind of get everything assembled, we're gonna stick it back in that cubby hole where that stud's at for that mounting bracket for that ECM, or ECU, I should say. And I'll bring you right back. One moment. And welcome back. So just show you what we've got here. You can see that we've got our analog monitor, mounted to our firewall. I took a little piece of rubber tubing and just stuck around the threads of the stud that was still sticking out, just in case it, you know, decides to vibrate or anything. I don't want it to hit up against that and cause a problem. So we've got our data cable attached to our monitor that hooks up into our I-dash, and I just ran a piece of this plastic wire loom over it to help protect it. It does run in front of this heater core hose, which I may look and see if there's a, we could get it far enough away. Yeah, it looks like we could just tie wrap it right straight to the transmission tube dipstick here, and that'll give it some extra clearance and get it away from that. You can see we're running behind here, so we're not going to interfere with our engine cover. So the next thing we need to do, and of course we're behind our brake booster as well, and what I may end up doing is also tie wrapping it just onto our other power cable that goes into our firewall. And I've been asked before about potential crosstalk or issues with running this next to the power cable. All of the Banks cabling looks to be shielded, so I'm not concerned with getting stray signals and things of that nature. However, if that doesn't prove to be the case and causes an issue, we'll address it then. But I would think that they would have taken that into account, knowing that, you know, these are going to be put in engine compartments and all kinds of places and all kinds of configurations. But like I said, we'll cross that bridge when we get to it and kind of see how it goes. So the next piece we want to get in is run our wiring harness, and we're going to use channels A and B on here, and I think what we'll do is we'll put the fuel pressure on channel A and the boost pressure on channel B, and then we'll save C and D for the transmission and the differential. So I'm going to get that cable plugged into right here into our analog monitor, and more than likely run it in a very similar fashion, break out A and B and put it here, and then we'll probably take maybe C and D and just loop it up and kind of tie wrap it out of the way next to in our little cubby hole where ABS module is, at least just for, you know, future use. So let me get that wiring in there and I'll bring you back. One moment. And welcome back. So played around with the wiring for probably about an hour or so. And what we ended up doing was wrapping everything in wire loom. Now it did come kind of pre-wrapped. Well, not pre. It was wrapped, and you can see it here. It's got this like nylon webbing on it. Let me get a piece of this out. Better show you. There we go. So you see it's got the nylon webbing on it. We went ahead and had, because we had this extra loom left over from a previous project, just to help protect things a bit more. You can see we just kind of shoved everything inside a wire loom as far as the sensor wiring coming off of the 4-channel analog, as well as our data cable. Got everything running behind. Again, just tie wrapped to the dipstick tube for the transmission to kind of keep it away from the heater core hoses. Going on back behind the intake, and then finally you can see where we meet up with our first break off. Again, just broke the 2 central leads off that we needed, wrapped them in some individual smaller loom that you can see a piece of here off the main harness. There's our tape connection where we kind of split out, and of course there's channel A coming into our fuel rail sensor, and channel B going into what is our boost manifold, and running the wires behind our brake booster as we were talking about earlier. And hopefully I can get you back there to see this. Let's get some light. There's 2 screw type studs that were coming out behind here, and I just wanted to keep the wiring from by chance, you know, vibrating or rubbing up against anything and starting to cut into it. And hopefully you can see that there. We just took a little piece of tubing, much like we did underneath where the monitor's at, and just shoved it over what was left of the little bolts or the studs in the back of the brake booster. And there's one on this side and one on the opposite side. Probably not going to see that too well. But again, just very, very similar to what we did here. We put a piece of tubing over what was left of the stud coming out of the wall there, just so the analog monitor didn't hit up against it. So I think we're good and protected as far as our wiring is concerned right now. And I will zip tie it, but you can kind of just see them dangling down here in the cubby hole for now. These are channels C and D that I will put, probably just put some electrical tape over those connectors for the time being, just to help protect them and cover them up. And I'll more than likely just come in here, probably maybe even right there, and just zip tie it to that wire, and that way we'll know they're there for the future use of things. So I think we've got a good handle on our Banks wiring. Obviously we got the fuel and boost pressure wired in at this point. We got our analog monitor wired in at this point, and of course it's also now connected internally into the iDash. Went ahead and put our drive belts on, and of course we've got our manifold vacuum slash boost pressure. Vacuum slash boost manifold per procharger assembled, and we've got our port ready to go to plug into that anti-surge valve or pop-off valve, however you want to call it. Let's see. So let's see if we can get the power steering hoses taken care of, and then that way it'll allow us to kind of tie our lines into here where we can get to everything, as well as into our pump itself. So let me go grab the lines out of that box and I'll be right back. One moment. And welcome back. So you can see we got our 3 power steering lines here. We got our high pressure line, and then we got our return line. Return lines, I should say. The return line looks to be the one that, of course, that end there would go into the transmission cooler, which mounts to the front radiator support. So what we can do is that we could definitely put this line on. Actually, we could put all these lines on, and these lines will just kind of sit there and dangle for a little bit until we're ready to attach them to the cooler. And let me show you this part numbers. So the part number for the 2 return lines, which again come with everything you see here, clamps, tie wraps, everything included. As with most Mopar OEM hoses. Let me get that sticker out of your way there. There we go. That's that number. And then the part number for the high pressure line. You can see there. So I'm going to take some tags off of our lines here, get you situated, and I'll bring you right back. So one moment. And welcome back. Well, let's see if we can get some lines installed, or at least loosely threaded anyway. Going to get a touch of ATF4 because this power steering system and the Dodge uses the same fluid as the transmission. So ATF4 or ATF plus 4 in this case, however you want to say it. Now this little curly Q end of this high pressure hose, it looks like a little candy cane, is what goes into the bottom of the pump, power steering pump. I'm just coating the O-ring on this with a little bit of ATF fluid, just so that it doesn't go in and dry, because we've cleaned all this out and pretty much drained it of all its fluid. Normally when you're changing these lines out, you know, there's going to be some residual fluid dripping out the pump or dripping off the rack or something along that nature, so it's going to kind of, you know, lube those O-rings for you, so to speak. And underneath here is where that fitting's at. There's only 2 fittings on this power steering pump. One threaded for the high pressure line that we're putting in now. Let me pan you up a little bit. And the other one, which is the return, which goes just a hose fitting on the bottom of the reservoir tank. Okay, so that's hand tight. That's good. It's got a little rubber deal on here. So this, the last one, it looks like this one is just going to lay right up against that tank. And there's these fittings are 2 different sizes down here on the steering rack itself. And if memory serves correctly, I think this goes into the bottom fitting. Based on the bend of the hose, well, it could actually reach either one, but I think based on the size of this, I think this is the smaller of the 2 fittings. If I recall correctly, the return hose, yeah, the return hose has a much fatter connection on it. Let me see something here. Let me see if I can get this plug out of here. And of course not. Plastic plug, but it's threaded in place. Probably going to block your view. I apologize if I do. Just want to thread this plug out of here. I believe that is the smaller of our two connections. Let me get the other plug out while we're here. Oh yeah, definitely. Okay, so the top one is definitely our larger connection. Looks like that'll be our return line. And the smaller one being our high pressure. I believe I've got that right. I mean, this looks like the high pressure line, especially since everything's got fittings on it. Everything has to be tightened and secured. Definitely want to hold everything in just due to the pressure it generates. Whereas the return line, when it goes in and out of the cooler, is just held on with some standard hose clamps. And again, I'm just lubricating the O-ring on the end of this hose connection. Getting it to line up so it'll hand thread in. Okay. It's almost there. Okay. So that is hand threaded in at that point. So when we tighten this up, I'll just have to make sure to hold that up against the reservoir tank. Same thing for down here. And of course the one return line where it goes into the cooler is going to be the only one on your return set that's got your fitting. So that one's pretty straightforward to find, that one. So let me do that. Let me tell you what, we'll get this one tight first and I'll jump to the next one. But rather than bore you with it, that's kind of the way it's going to look. We'll get this tight, we'll get that tight, and then we'll get that one side of that return line tightened. And of course the others, and I'll bring you back when we make the connection to the top reservoir tank for the side that comes out of the, it's either going to come out of the cooler and go back to the tank. Yeah, it would have to. I would think that would have to. High pressure would have to come out of this hose, goes into the rack, get used, come out of the rack. It looks like it then goes through the cooler and then comes out of the cooler and then goes back up into the reservoir, if I've got that right. So let me go get this tight. I'll get the other one in there tight and I'll bring you back. One moment. And welcome back. So we got our two lines that go into our steering rack tightened. So that's the high pressure line from the bottom of the steering pump into the bottom of the rack. And then of course, one of the lines that goes into the transmission cooler is tight. So I'm going to put the line that goes into the bottom of the cooler here in place. We may have to swap this line around the other direction because it's got this hole down here. If I remember correctly, it gets like a bolt or something passed through it. So it either goes on that way or it goes on that way. I mean, either way it'll fit. I'll tell you what, we're gonna go this way with it, and if we have to, we can pull it off and just flip around the other direction. So there we go. We're in the bottom of our tank. What we gotta do now is I'm just gonna rotate the hose to get to that clamp better. Something like that. To see the hose naturally wants to lay about that way. Tell you what, let's turn it get a hold of that clamp. I need a bigger bite. Okay, a little bit smaller. There we go. Okay, so let's rotate our hose where it seems to want to lay as far as its natural bend. And we're going to put our clamp let's see, right about there. All right, perfect. And that's got it. So now what we're left with, pan you down, it's just our two lines that come out here, and we'll meet up with our cooler once we get the front radiator support. And like I was saying, it's got this rather big tie wrap here that just kind of has what looks to be a bolt hole going through it to possibly secure this line on something. So when we get the radiator support back in here, we'll have to take a look. I also took this clamp off that came with it in shipping, and it looks like it just kind of clamps these two together. Let's put this on the other side of our high pressure line. There we go. Let's see. May end up looking like that, or we can put both of these, which I may do. Tell you what, let's do it that way. Let's put that one there. Let's bend that one a little bit, get it around our high pressure line. Put it on the other side of that. And that way we can put our clamp kind of on where we want when we, like I said, get everything installed. We'll final up the location of this. Okay, so awesome. So we're making some connections here. So that takes care of power steering with the exception of the cooler. Now, while we can kind of still get in there, we got a little bit more room to play with yet. Let's see if we can get the caps off of our AC compressor and at least get the lines installed while we got good access to it. So let me go grab that line set and I'll bring you back. One moment. And welcome back. So I just want to show you this real quick. It's another item we're going to get to. I'm just in the process of feeding them through. These are the transmission line sets, and you can see we got plenty of space up underneath to get these fed to where they need to go. So this is the set that'll go plug into the side of the transmission, and they come out at least to the area that we believe is leaking on this set we returned. Now, however, this set, when you purchase it, doesn't go all the way to the transmission cooler. There's a set of like little stubby lines that we're going to have to take off the old set and merge onto this set. So that part number, you can see it says trans line. Again, is this piece, but if you're looking to replace the entire line set, there's still that little piece that goes from here to the transmission cooler. So, like I said, it was only leaking. We're not replacing the line set just because we think it's contaminated. So I think it's perfectly fine in this case. We'll just take this little stub piece off the old line set when it comes time to hook it up into the transmission cooler. But you can see we're just in the process of getting this fished through past the various frame mounts and such. Like I said, it can be done. You've got enough room in here. You just kind of have to, as you see us doing, twist it, manipulate it, feed it until you kind of get it to where you need to be, which is, that's pretty close, maybe a little bit farther forward. And then we'll crawl underneath later and get it and show you getting it plugged back into the side of the transmission, getting the caps on. And like I said, we'll just leave these stubbed ends covered up. And then when we're ready to drop the transmission cooler in here, we'll take these little stub lines off the old set. So let me go grab those air conditioning lines we spoke about earlier, and I'll bring you back. One moment. And welcome back. So I just want to show you these two hose assemblies. They are the aftermarket ones. They're 4 Seasons, the same individuals who made the compressor. And there's your part number there for the first line. And your part number. Let's straighten that out so it's actually visible. Part number for our second line. So this line you see here with the hole in the middle and the kind of the alignment tab on the side, that is the piece that will plug into the expansion valve in the firewall, and it will overlap the liquid line. So we know where that one's going to go. Which means this is the one that'll go from one of the lines. It'll go straight from the compressor, and it will eventually come over here and hang out along with that liquid line, eventually go into the condenser. So let's see in what order is going to be best to get which line to fit into place. Because we got one that kind of comes off in the back and another one that kind of comes down at an angle. Okay, so let me start. I might be able to get you kind of on a tripod looking, yeah, maybe that way. See if I can get a mount in there. One moment. And welcome back. So we're just looking at our compressor here and the condition of our lines and kind of what line needs to go where. And we had one that just wasn't matching up, and then kind of discovered what it was. Looking at the old compressor, you'll see where the mounting stud's at on this first connector, the connector closest to the pulley. You notice it's back here. And when this one was built at the factory, they put it up here on this other mounting point, so it won't match up with the cooling line. Now I see that there's a threaded portion in the back, so it looks like this is going to be either front or rear. So what we're going to have to do is we're going to back this stud out, see if we can get the stud out and put it on the rearmost mount point, and that should fix our fitment problem. So I'm going to get looks like probably an E-Torx on that, and see if we can swap that around, and I'll bring you back. One moment. And welcome back. So I just want to show you, we got our first line on, which is our rear line. And a couple of things were holding us up. We kept hitting our oil fill, so we had to make sure that we were on this side of that dipstick, because it kept wanting to grab the corner of it. And you know, those lines are they're factory bent. You know, it's kind of like a puzzle. It's only going to fall in place one way. So you can see we got our line comes over here, and eventually there'll be a bracket that'll hold that. So I'm going to get you set up on the frame rail, and I'm going to see if we can catch video of getting the second one installed. So let me get you set up and I'll bring you back. One moment. And welcome back. So I think we got you in a good position to kind of see this port. And I'm just going to grab a bit of oil that's leaching out of the compressor here. I'm just going to coat this O-ring so that this doesn't seat dry. Okay, one moment, almost got it. Okay. So hopefully I don't block your view doing this, but I need to come down alongside our other line. It looks like come between our harnesses. Okay, so this line's going to sit inside of this line, it looks like. And figure out where they're going to overlap. Looks like, yeah, this line is going to be behind the bigger line. So we got it on our stud. We just got to get it in the right position. Hopefully you can see that there, so that this will fall into place. Because like I said, they're a puzzle, so they're only going to fall into place in one way. That is in there now. We need to slightly turn it to get it. It's not quite where it needs to be. Hold on, I need to be on the other side of the line up here. There we go. That's where we need to be. Okay. Yeah, so like I was saying, they're interesting because they're only going to go on one way and one way only, and if you don't have them lined up, they're not going to play well. But when you do get them lined up, fall right in. And of course, we'll have to add in, like I was saying earlier in the previous video, we'll have to add in the appropriate amount of oil for the system. And we'll have to draw a vacuum, make sure that we don't have any leaks, and then we'll have to charge it. But that'll all be in future parts of the video. Let me get you pulled out of your I will tighten those bolts. Just one moment. Let's see here. So in order to make it a bit easier, I just pulled the vacuum lines out of the way for our evap purge solenoid, because we were hitting these. So we can just plug this one, which comes from the vapor canister, if I recall correctly, into the back in the bottom of our solenoid. This one can come around here. And let's go underneath. Yep, underneath our air conditioning line there. Goes back into the intake. And this one also came with a clamp that I think went right about there. Yeah, I think. I'll tell you what, I may have to move that one down because I don't want that vacuum line rubbing. Actually, okay, we can just twist it. There we go. And there's our engine oil. Engine oil is free and clear. We can get it out from between those two lines. And then we got a brace that's going to go here. It'll hold those in. So let me get those tight. Then I'm going to get the hardware for the brace, and we'll get this brace put on. So one moment. And welcome back. So we got our bolts tightened on our compressor end. There's also a little black clip that you'll see right down here that clips between the lines, kind of, I guess, supports them and separates them at the same time. It looks like mainly just keeps them separated. That didn't come with this replacement line set. I actually took that off the factory, the old line set we removed. So I'm just looking at the bracket here. This is the center support bracket that goes on the front of the motor / intake. And sorry for the camera work here. So what we can do is just take our two line sets, sneak this in behind it. It looks like the bigger one goes towards the bottom. Yeah, there we go. No, bigger one on top. I'm looking at it wrong. Okay, let's flip that back around. Let's get our small line set in there, our big line set in there. Get it pushed into our bracket. Now we can get our bracket lined back up with where it mounts on the motor. And there's two locations. We may have to slide our line set a little bit to get it to line up. But you got a nut here. It goes around that stud. And it goes and bolts in to this insert in the front. So let me wiggle and kind of fight with this a little bit and get this bolt in here, and then I'll bring you right back. One moment. And welcome back. So we got that front brace we were looking at earlier tightened up, got our AC lines clipped, and now we're going to be looking at the two pieces that go into this expansion valve. And the first thing I want to see if we can do is get access to the O-ring on the other end of this liquid line so that we can replace it. Let's see what it's got on here for an existing one. So it's got a ring, the O-ring that looks like that. Let me look in the kit and see if we got something we can replace that with. Put a new one on it. Okay, that looks like it. So that looks like that's the one right there in that bag. And what I'm looking at the, sorry, you fell. I'm looking at the O-ring kit that came with the bottle of PAG oil and the filter dryer. It was the service kit that we looked at in a previous video. Actually, I think this is the one that came with the, correction, I think that was the little baggie of O-rings that came with the compressor. Which would make sense. Now, we didn't replace the lines, the O-rings on the lines we put in the compressor. Them, them being brand new lines came with, obviously new seal, so there wasn't a need. So now that we've got that thoroughly soaked, come in here, put our new O-ring on, got it. Remove our covers. And then I'm going to expose off our new line, which, yep, let me just put a little oil on our replacement line. That's going to be the bigger one of the two. Okay. As we were talking about earlier, and as we discovered when we took these apart, one line will overlap the other line. So we want the little liquid, smaller line to go in first, followed by our bigger line. Oop. Can I get it over? It's going to fit over there, and then around. And sorry, I got to manipulate the pipe, and it's moving the camera. Okay. I think that's got it. Yeah, feels like it's got it. Okay. So, let me go find the fastener for that. One moment. I believe it is this one right here. How's your view? Okay. Still kind of see what I'm doing here. Okay. And then all we got to do is get that tightened up, and that will be those lines installed. Now let me get you off of where I have the mount kind of pinned in here. Okay, so I need to get that line tightened up, but you can kind of see that this supercharger kind of, well, it's going to rest on there. I don't think it'll be an issue because, again, I don't think it'll be enough vibration on this, and this is a pretty smooth textured case. for that to kind of worry about anything. But I'll look at the book and see if it mentions anything about it. I mean, there's not much you're going to be able to do about the location of these lines. So yeah, so like I was saying, when we were putting it together, it was nice to be able to put this supercharger on without all of this stuff in the way, because it just made it, again, not impossible, just, I guess kind of that much more of a pain. So let me get that tight and I'll bring you back. One moment. And welcome back. So you can see we got our bolt tight at this point, and the book doesn't really reference this kind of rubbing up against here. I don't think it'll cause an issue. This is pretty smooth. It's up against rubber. If it causes an issue in the future, we could always kind of pick the line up like that and maybe, tie wrap an extra block of rubber, something between this and that. Now, it looks like there might be a fitment issue with the air filter, but looking at the book, it looks like they give you kind of a 45 or 90 degree elbow that's going to go here and jut the air filter off this direction. That's the reason why that bracing for the old air box that we took off yesterday has to come off. So like I said, bit of a, and I don't see a clear enough picture in the manual to verify that they actually show that it does this. It looks like they have what they're showing in the manual is just a slightly different version of RAM. Again, I don't think that's going to be a huge issue. I would have liked if if we have to, we may be able to tweak the line up a little bit just to pick it up. But either way, I guess I'm rambling. We're just going to have to kind of keep an eyeball on that and see if that becomes an issue in the future. But the good news is we've got our lines attached to our compressor and tightened. We got our lines reattached to our firewall, got the O-rings replaced, and we got that tight. So what we've got left hanging off the front here are AC lines to meet up with our compressor. Condenser. We'll have to put a new O-ring on that when we do that, because remember, we're keeping the old liquid line. We'll also replace that Schrader valve when the time comes to it. We've got our 2 transmission lines, which we're going to crawl up underneath here in a moment to connect those into the transmission. And then we've got our 2 power steering cooler lines. Let's get those untangled down here, waiting to be plugged back into the cooler. So, with that being said, let me grab a shop light and a couple clips, and we'll go underneath and get those lines clipped into the transmission. So, one moment. And welcome back. So, I got you coiled around the exhaust. See if we can get this shot. So, you can see our 2 connection points for our transmission cooling lines. We're just going to bring our line set in. Take our protective rubber caps off, and what holds these in, I made mention to this before, there it is. I just dropped one, which is what you don't want to do because they're very, very small. These little clips right here, they were called by many names, mainly because if you go to take one off and it springs off and flies across the shop, good luck finding it ever again. So let's get all the things lined up, get them pushed in. There we go, that one's in. Our top one, there we go, top one is now seated. You can see they just go in, they'll pop into place, and then these rings, you should just be able to get them started in the groove that's in them, and get them to lock into place. Okay, I think that got it. There it went. That got it. Now it's in the groove. And those are basically retaining clips. Yep, there's my other one. We'll do the same thing here. You'll see like a little slot on each side of where this clip goes into a groove. Let me pause you. I'm going to zoom you into this bottom one and see if I can get you to see it. One moment. And welcome back. So I got you zoomed in about as far as I can get you. I'm just going to, again, push this clip in the position, maybe. Okay, let me try it from this direction. No, don't fall. Nope, that's not the right spot. There it went. Okay, so hopefully you kind of heard that snap into the little like openings that are in that groove. So with that in, that should take care of that. They're secure. We can now take our caps, slide our caps up. There we go. See, that top one wasn't in all the way. I don't know if you heard it. You didn't see it because it wasn't on it. But the white cap wouldn't slide in, and one leg of it was still sticking out. And it just clicked. There we go. So if these clips are in all the way, then our white caps should slide into place and lock. There it goes. Okay, that one's a little weak, but it's just the cover. Okay, now we've got our last remaining retention clip. Let me get you off of the exhaust. If you remember, when we put the oil pan bolts in, oh, one was a stud on this side. Right there. There we go. And you'll see our the new line set came in with this retention clip that will come up here and just push into place on that stud. There we go. You know, if you heard, oh, sorry, you didn't see it, but hopefully you heard it, but there it is. That just pushes in place and holds those lines right where you see them. So awesome. Okay, so our line set is in, our lock tabs are in, we're secure here, we're secure here. Okay, let me get out from underneath the truck and I'll bring you back. One moment. And welcome back. So we got our transmission line set attached to our transmission and on the supporting stud on the oil pan. So our transmission line set is hanging out here ready to receive the stub line set, which will eventually go into the transmission cooler. You can see the old transmission cooler here. It has connection points that, just like the transmission, we'll have to take this little stub piece of line off the old factory set and reuse it, but that'll be fine. So we'll do that when it comes time to mount everything. We did our AC lines into our compressor. Those are mounted. Support bracket here is also mounted. We got our little clip in there as well to keep the lines separated. We also attached the AC lines to the extension valve in the rear of the firewall. We also, looks like we also took care of our power steering lines, which are just hanging out here ready to plug into the power steering cooler. Most importantly, we also did our drive belts. So we have our accessory drive belt installed, as you can see, and our main drive belt for our supercharger. We also took care of the replacement coil that was needed for the number 8. That is now in and installed as well. We also took care of mounting the Banks 4-channel analog device, or I should say 4-channel analog adapter, and went ahead and wire loomed the wiring, got everything run. It's connected into the iDash inside of the cab at this point. We have channel A monitoring fuel rail pressure, channel B monitoring boost pressure. C and D are hanging out in the corner over there next to the ABS module for future use. Speaking of boost, we assembled a procharger's vacuum/boost little manifold device here, and we've got a provision here in which we're switching things up slightly from the way procharger did it, and we're using these little nylon quick release fittings to be able to use some nylon tubing to eventually go from this port to the anti-surge valve or the pop-off valve or relief valve, however you would like to refer to it. I would also like to say thank you to everyone who has subscribed thus far. When I checked the channel this morning, I was happy, very happy to see that we have broken the 2,000 subscriber barrier. We're actually slightly above it. So thank you to everyone who has subscribed. If you have not, please consider to do so. Our goal is to continue to grow this channel and be able to bring more content such as this your direction. So with all that being said, I think we're going to call this a video at this point. We covered a lot of, again, a lot of kind of little things that needed to be done, that needed to be buttoned up, again, in prep for just kind of, once again, doing as much as we can while we have nice, free, easy access without the bumper and everything being here to kind of reach in here and do what we need to do. But I think we're at the point now where we're going to start making steps to get the radiator support shroud in here, which will then allow us to obviously put the radiator, condenser, start to put the intercool piping in here, as well as the intercooler for the supercharger itself. So we've got a lot done. We got a lot more to do, and I thank you for the views. Thank you for the clicks. It's much, much appreciative. With that being said, I will bring you back for the next one. Thank you much. Bye.